Thursday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock in time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good weekend. Browns will wrap things up, then get some time off mandated by the NFL. No workouts Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they get back at it and get ready for game week. Tony Grossi, longtime Cleveland Browns beat reporter on ESPN Cleveland, talking about what he has seen from the Browns quarterback position during training camp.
How confident are you that Watson will be able to throw the ball down the field?
Watson can throw the ball. Okay. If I came away from training camp with any take at all, it's that forget the arm injury is not an issue.
Okay.
So he will be able to throw deep. He could throw to any part of the field. I don't see any drop off in spin, velocity, whatever.
Let's welcome in Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. And Jake, there's questions because of the injury, because he hasn't played in preseason, but the beat reporters who have been there every day pretty much unanimously say the arm hadn't been a problem.
Yeah, I've seen him throwing live myself on 4 different occasions being up there. I don't think the arm is the problem. I think physically he looks fine. So, that was something I was obviously keyed into because he's coming back from a not a very common shoulder injury. It was one that you see more in pitchers and some other sports. You don't, I think volleyball, it pops up here and there, but yeah, it was a very, very strange injury, but the physical part looks fine. I know he took a day off from throwing, but having on a very much smaller scale gone through some camps in my day, like your shoulder gets tired. You're throwing every day quite a bit. So I don't think it was very strange at all for him to take a day and be limited in practice with the shoulder. But again, I don't think that's the problem. And I think anybody who's claiming the mental stuff is broken or it's bad, like judging it on practice, I think is such a dicey way to go about it when you're trying to sort through things in practice and you're trying to push your boundaries and make throws and test what you can and can't do. And Watson needs as much of that stuff as anybody playing 12 games in the last 48, right? It's a lot of games. So I definitely think we have to just see it. Coming to this world of crazy panic about how good or bad, really essentially how bad he could be, is basing it on practice is just a really dangerous thing to do. So you got to let it play out. He's got to stay healthy and he's got to show what he is able to do or not do at this point. But taking the preseason or training camp as the means of justifying panic about that, yeah, I don't think that's worth anyone's time right now. Like, they're going to get tested early in some real games and we'll be able to judge what's working well and not working. And I think in an ideal world here, they want him to play all season and get as much evidence. They haven't had that chance, right? The first year, he only plays 6 games at the end of the year. The second year, he's hurt and only plays 5. So you just haven't had a chance to see him. How can you really feel good or bad about a guy you're not seeing that much? That's what it comes down to. So he needs to play 17, 18 ball games and good Lord willing, play 19 or so if they get a playoff win and go from there. And like I said, there's the panic or concern is understood based on it's been a long time since he's been the quarterback he was in 2020. But you need to see him play to totally gauge that. And that's something I think we're forgetting a little bit too much. Like, practices in Berea don't really mean very much to what decisions get truly made in a ball game.
So the quarterback positions and the running back, and to a certain extent the tight end, those are kind of figuring themselves out relative to the roster. But when you look at this roster overall, how good do you think it is? And are there areas that you would upgrade? And the running back, I'm sure there won't be just 2. We'll know who's there shortly.
Yeah, they gotta make some moves, and I know we're doing that. A little talking here a little before that, but yeah, they'll bring in a third back. They'll welcome Nick and those guys back at some point in the early portion of the season too. So that'll take care of itself. I think when you hear a lot of people who cover the league, because I like to listen to league-wide perspective because they know more rosters. I'm very honed in on the Browns. It's hard to really identify a true weak position, right? As long as Jack and Jed come back and they're relatively healthy, then you have a chance to say tackle isn't a problem, as big a problem as it was. I think on the surface, if you're looking at pinpointing a position on offense, left tackle is definitely not where you want it to be. But at this point, nobody's giving up a left tackle. There is no real improving that other than schematically helping whoever's in there. And if you can get Jed ramped up quick enough, or if you can get Jack to kind of work through the kinks of going back to the left side of the offensive line again, you have a chance to be okay. Defensively, is the depth at linebacker beyond Hicks and JOK a concern? Yeah, maybe is. But I think every team across the league has depth concerns. So I don't want to sit here and say this is the best roster in the NFL, but I do think objectively looking at it, this is a pretty strong roster position by position that, can get tested at any minute in terms of the injuries and putting depth into the portion of the front row here. But I definitely feel that as far as the roster that they have built, and this isn't telling you whether they're going to win a certain number of games or not, but they've built a roster of talented frontline players that I'm not sure they have to be crazy hungry to go find somebody for the 53 that is going to actually play. So there are trades, there are assets you can collect here, but the Browns, as you know them, are largely going to be what you see on the field in 10 days or so. So yeah, it's in a good spot. That part of it, getting those guys back from the injuries and off the PUP list and stuff like that, they're in a pretty good spot there.
So this is from The Athletic. The most surprising roster cut from every NFL team. For the Browns, they go Jermaine Ifedi. His release was a surprise because he spent the last week plus as a starting left tackle. Even with Jack Conklin back to practice Tuesday, there's nothing settled at that position. I suppose I was a little surprised by that. Added note, Jerron Christian was released from the Titans. Chris Hubbard, who has played that swing tackle and played for the Browns, also cut. So you could, in theory, swap either one of them out for James Hudson as a swing tackle. I'm just throwing that out there. Are you surprised by Ifedi? What'd you see when you looked at him on tape?
Well, there were quite a few names. I think people were like, "Well, I kind of surprised they let that guy go." But a big picture lesson to learn about what the Browns are doing is they are taking vested veterans, and what that means is guys who have 4 or more years of experience, and giving them guaranteed contracts and giving themselves the flexibility to bring those guys back into their orbit after letting them go. Because guys who are not at the vet and veteran stage, who are on the younger side, who don't have the years of experience, are subject to waivers. And you don't want to put your good young players in front of waivers, right? Like, you don't want to expose them. DTR is a great example of that, whereas you could try to get him onto your practice squad, but if you put him into the waiver wire, someone's going to claim him. There are several of those, right? So they have gone to the approach, and there are a lot of names here, and especially some over the years that they've gotten creative with. The practice squad allows you to hold 6 veteran spots. So what that means is you can sign guys who you can make deals with that say, hey, we are going to release you at the initial 53 to work the system, to get the guys we don't want exposed to waivers back into our 53, and then we're going to maneuver people. Maybe Bookie Watson, the linebacker, is going to go on IR. Hudson could go on short-term IR because of his ankle injury, and they'll bring them back, like an agreement in place. Like, we're going to take care of your guy here at the start. We think he's a part of this, either on the practice squad, or we're going to get him back onto the active roster. They've done this with Michael Dunn before, done this with Maurice Hurst as recently as last year. I do think Deontay Foreman, I do think what we'll see with Jermaine Ifedi is, my guess is that he will be back. I can't guarantee that, but I feel pretty good about that, given, Jack and Jed are off the PUP list, and they're probably going to look to be playing. So I don't think we have to have this massive concern the way The Athletic is painting the picture. But I definitely think that the vested veteran thing is something fans should know, because this is how they're getting guys back into their orbit. They're paying them a guaranteed portion of money and then able to talk them into working their way back. James Prochet is another one. There are a lot of these examples of guys finding the practice squad or finding the active roster that they're going about. We're comfortable bringing in these veterans and giving them a guaranteed portion of money, with the understanding that we are trying to pull you back. Because the danger in letting go of a veteran is they can go sign with any team. But if you have this understanding, this wink, wink, it's not guaranteed, you're definitely doing a hard wink here with the agent, we're going to bring him back, then that's how it works out. Like I said, Dunn and Maurice Hurst are recent examples. So on the front of that list this year is definitely Deontay Foreman, and it's definitely Jermaine Ifedi, of guys that they want to either get them back onto the 53 right away or put them onto the practice squad for a game day elevation, which you can do upward of 4 times before a guy has to be back into the active roster. So I think what you should take from that is Andrew Berry is very good at this. They've gone about curtailing the vested veteran stuff in a unique way, and the same thing could happen when if they have to release Tyler Huntley. He's another vested veteran at quarterback that they could then bring him back to the practice squad if they want to. It's just a thing to know that all these veterans, they're really working back channels to make sure that they stay inside their orbit. And you would ask, like, why would a veteran do that? Well, the Browns are giving them guaranteed money. They're, this contract in place, and then they're saying, you're going to have to deal with maybe getting cut, and then we'll bring you back. It's just about protecting as many of your guys within the means of the NFL rules as you can.
All right, so let's shift our attention a little bit to the offensive side of the ball and the receivers. We expect a little bit more shotgun, a little bit more 3, maybe even some 4 wide receiver sets. Who do you think could thrive for the Browns, receiver, ball catcher, if you will, in that type of offense?
Well, they're going to be an 11 personnel heavy team, which is very different from what they've been. And what I mean by 11 personnel is it's a way of describing who's on the field, right? So the system has been formulated that you have a very finite number of skill players, always equals 5 in total, right? So if we say 11 personnel, that's 1 running back, that's 1 tight end, that's 3 wide receivers, right? Because if you take the 5 linemen and the 1 quarterback, everything has to equal out to 11. It's just a shortened way of describing how many of those positions are on the field. So if it's 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, right? So on and so forth. When Kevin arrived, coming from Minnesota, he was a very 13 personnel heavy coach. He liked to use that. That means 1 running back and 3 tight ends. Think back to when he first got here. In the second year he was here, 2021, a lot of tight ends on the field. They would do that to manipulate heavier personnel groupings from the defense, which is linebackers on the field, more of those, more defensive linemen. And a good justification Kevin had for that was, like, we know that teams don't have great pressure packages when they're in base looks versus dime, DB heavy looks, where you can get super creative and put some funky pressure packages in place, and it's harder for the offense to handle. They have worked away from that. They've worked into a very heavy 11 personnel team. I think they're going to be top 5, upwards of 75% in that. I don't think they'll dip into 4 wide receiver territory unless David gets hurt. So knock on wood on that, because I think they want him on the field all the time. So you're talking about Ford or whatever running back, Njoku, and then your 3 wide receivers. So if you're looking at this, I mean, who's going to thrive? I mean, you got to continue to use David in the ways they did last year. I think they will. And I think when Deshaun was in that Baltimore game, when he played really well in the second half, it started to click for him, how to find David, navigate him, let him work after the catch. I do think that an improved and actually threatening slot player for them, and I expect Jerry Jeudy to be in there a lot as that sort of bigger bodied slot player, is going to be a guy that gets the football a decent amount. They'll still find Amari a lot, and Amari's expectation is to have an 80 catch, 1,000-yard season again, 2 straight years of that, right? I think that's in place, but I continue to think the top 3 names should have, if the Browns are going where they think they're going, should have good seasons, right? You would like Amari to be like an 1,100-yard receiver, Jerry Jeudy to be pushing that 1,000-yard threshold, and then David to be like a 750 to 800-yard guy. That's what they need in the modern game, and I think they will. And Elijah Moore will sprinkle in and play a lot of outside snaps and provide some speed and vertical route tree stuff that he can do a pretty good job of. And then Cedric Tillman, when they want to put Jeudy outside, they'll probably bring Cedric Tillman into the slot and move him around. They just have some versatile pieces in that group, and obviously David can get down the field vertically against safeties and challenge them, and he can also really put high levels of stress on the underneath portions of the game, because they figured out last year, like, hey, let's get 85 the football in the shallow portions of the field and let him be this unique, gigantic human being in space that DBs just cannot get to the ground, and he can run away from linebackers. You led all tight ends last year in yards after catch, and it doesn't take much to figure out how they unlock that. So I think they're going to try to continue to unlock that in unique ways this year.
Jake Burns from the BrownsFilmBreakdown.com website. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. So other side of the break, we'll look at some free agents. We will also have a film breakdown. Jake looking at RPOs and how the Browns are going to use them. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, dough, Skrilla, chips, bread, and mo. 2, 5, 10, and 20. 30 big ones, games aplenty. Cheddar, butter, loot, and scratch. Find the letters, make a match, cause there's many words for cash, no doubt, and many ways to play a cash word. Check 'em out. Cash word from Ohio, lottery. It's game time, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes. to know.
We continue talking Browns with Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. This is from the Bleacher Report. Bargain free agents at every position after roster cuts earlier in the week. Running backs. They list Kareem Hunt. They had Dalvin Cook. He signed with the Cowboys a little bit earlier in the week. And Matt Breida. They say potential fits, Browns and the Cowboys. Matt Breida was among the 49ers' final cuts. Hasn't been a regular starter since 2018. 29-year-old. Serviceable depth player with at least one start each of the last three of the last 4 seasons. I'll get it out. Jake, Breida makes sense to you. Is there any other free agent? We've already said we think Foreman, will likely be on this team.
I think Deontay comes back unless that rib injury that he suffered in Seattle is more serious than we've been led to believe. I feel like he's back. I also could understand somebody like Breida because he runs well and can be a part of some a little bit maybe perhaps more consistent version of Pierre Strong, but I would be kind of surprised if they went outside of what that expectation is with those 3 backs, Jerome, Deontay, and then Pierre, and then kind of like in the first 6 weeks working Nick and Nyheim Hines back into the fold. So those are interesting names, right? Like I know the NFL just released their waiver system stuff. The Browns didn't do anything in that. I'm not surprised by that. They didn't want to claim anyone. But some running backs, younger guys moved, like Hassan Haskins and Cody Schrader's a rookie. But I don't envision them going outside of that unless, like I said, we could end up surprised because maybe Foreman is less healthy than we have been led to believe. But getting a running back this late into your world is really hard to get them up to speed, and that's a huge part of what Foreman benefits from is his being around the team for this long. And he was also playing pretty well in the preseason, moving well. So I have to hope that works itself back out because the names there are they're okay, but it's not going to change the bottom line of this team, right?
So tight ends, they list C.J. Uzomah, Donald Parham from the Chargers, and Joshua DeGuara. Chargers released Parham, a bit of a surprise given his history and past production. 27-year-old, appeared 47 games. Chargers red zone threat with 11 touchdowns. Any of those guys intrigue you for the Browns? Is there another name at tight end? We again, only 2 of them on the roster right now, Akins and Njoku.
Well, they love to use a 6th and sometimes 7th offensive lineman in those heavy personnel groupings like goal line and 4th and short. I would not be surprised if they stick with just 2 tight ends, especially if they're worried about, quarterback in some way, shape, or form in terms of maybe you have to keep that 3rd quarterback, and that kind of tightens the belt at other positions. They plan to just use 1 tight end on the field a lot. There could be like 10 snaps or so maybe for Jordan Akins, but even when it's like, again, down on the goal line, you traditionally think of 3 tight ends, 2 running backs. Like they don't really live in that world. Like Nick Harris will be their fullback, and they'll probably bring in like Javion Cohen, another 6th offensive lineman, and even a 7th guy if they want to, as far as O linemen go, and Zach Zinter, and like just go out and try to bully people in that way, right? So I don't know that, like, I remember Steven Carlson hit the market. He was with the Browns a few years back. I just don't, they're so, like, they have this tight knit of players they look at, and they so rarely, like, they brought Mike Ford back to the special practice squad today, the corner from last year, special teams guy. Like, they just like their guys, and the NFL has worked away from this world where, because the practice squad has opened itself up in such a unique way, that it almost serves as this 16-player minor league situation for your team, and you just don't see the movement you used to see all over the place. So I don't have this high expectation that we're going to see a different running back or tight end, even though, like Josiah DeGuara could be somebody who's like an interesting Giovanni Ricci type fullback hybrid tight end replacement. That's interesting. The other names there, like Parham, yeah, I mean, there's relevance. They could be fine, but I just don't know how hungry the Browns are to put a 3rd tight end on an 11 personnel team that likes to use offensive linemen and heavy looks. So I would probably put it at like 90-10 that they end up with 2 tight ends, and then they have Zaire Mitchell-Paden, who did make some nice strides in the preseason as a player they could bring up and elevate on a game day from the practice squad if they wanted to.
All right, let's take a look at this. I found this interesting. This is from Total Pro Sports, ranking all 32 head coaches for the 2024 season. They go Andy Reid 1, Kyle Shanahan 2, Sean McVay 3. They have Zach Taylor ranked 4th. Then Harbaugh, the Harbaugh brothers, John, then Jim. Dan Campbell at 7, D'Amico Ryans at 8, Shane Steichen at 9, Todd Bowles at 10, Matt LaFleur at 11, Mike Tomlin all the way down at 12, Mike McDaniel, Kevin O'Connell. They have Kevin Stefanski at 15. In his 4 seasons as head coach, Browns are 37-30, good for a .552 winning percentage. Success with such a cursed franchise, heck of a feather to have in your cap, especially with miracle we saw him pull off last year with Joe Flacco under center. Perspective means something when you're judging a head coach. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry inherited a mess, and the fact that he is 37-30 is pretty good. I guess I'm saying I think he should be higher than 15th. I'll just go out and say it.
Yeah, he's certainly worthwhile. I mean, you can point to the 2 Coach of the Year awards, and I think the world of Kevin as a head coach. I think this is gonna always be based off of the team's perception, and like we know how people view Cleveland because of the decision to bring Deshaun in from the national level is just, I hate the phrase, it is what it is, but that's the case. Now, if they win a playoff game or 2, he probably is like inside the Dan Campbell territory. You just need to win. I know he won. It was a part of obviously the game planning and everything that went into the Pittsburgh win. But there's still people that try to combat like he wasn't on the sidelines for that game. Just win a playoff game or 2, and I think it works itself out. I think this list is 15 pretty good. I'm kind of interested in like what has Kevin O'Connell done to be in this list, but nonetheless, like again, it's just like perception around these teams, and then it drives into the coach as well. And I think if you have a coach inside the top 15 here, you probably have a pretty good NFL head coach, and I think there's quite clearly an argument for Kevin to be ahead of some guys like Shane Steichen and some others, but it's just like, where did the person who wrote this write it from? Like, where are they located? What are their biases they bring into it? I think if you put an objective poll out there, I think there'd probably be Kevin inside the top 10. But with these things, my general theory is win playoff games, and the respect that you want from those outside of the circle of Cleveland football will probably start to improve.
Yeah, that's fair. The question I would have, Steichen and Ryans and even Campbell, they've done it for a year. Let's see what happens. Can you build on success? That's my only question with those.
Exactly.
All right, let's say we did a little bit of this a couple weeks ago. Let's take another look. Browns offense and what we expect it to be this year, and specifically the RPO concept. So take us through. You have some video that we're going to look at. Take us through this.
Yeah, so I think you're always looking at how the Browns are using opportunities to create cheap yards. This is an RPO, double-sided RPO concept, so you can throw it to the right to the quick screen, or you can throw it left to the speed out. And they throw it left, 5 yards, easy gain, right? The point of this is you can run counter up front if you want to. If number 29 there on the right side, watch Winston's eyes right there. He's watching him. If he doesn't jump to the flat right away, just take the 5-yard throw. I think something that people have talked about covering the Browns for a while is like, we want cheap yards. Well, RPOs hold second-level defenders like you see, create easy throws, and you can gain 5 yards. I just think it's going to be, and again, another good look at it right here, of the option to run. Like if the corner is down, or if that invert outside will linebacker jumps, you're definitely handing that ball off to Foreman. But if he doesn't, just take the 5 yards, right? That's just like running a fly sweep for 5 yards or whatever it takes to get those easy yards. Because this is easy. It's like one, read it, boom, step, throw. 5 yards are hard to come by at times in the NFL. So if you can find some concepts that can get you those 5 yards, it's something you should have in. And again, another look at the quarterback's eyes, who he's reading, throwing it outside. If 29 jumped to the flat right away, he'd give it a football up inside for a run. So I've just been tracking, like Ken Dorsey in Buffalo last year led the NFL in RPO usage. The Browns have wanted to do more of it, but I don't think Kevin is like naturally a gifted designer of RPO stuff, or comfortable calling it, when to call it, how to call it. It's not in his background per se. So getting some people in like Ken, like Tommy Rees, the tight ends coach, who did a lot of that at Alabama with Jalen Milroe and at Notre Dame, And then, working in other voices like Nick Charlton as well, who they brought in from UConn, and different ways to look at football. And I think that you pay attention, you can see some different motion stuff that I think is going to be good for them. I know we've talked about on the show here before. And then there's like some new RPO wrinkles that should make the team you watch on Sunday feel a little bit different than what you've seen in the past 2 or 3 years.
When a team runs RPO, what does it do to the defense, and does it open certain things up, conceptually?
Yeah, the point of them is to put defenders in conflict, right? Like that's always what you want to do. And I mean, play action and run action stuff where you're throwing downfield is the same premise. But what you're able to do is, a lot of concepts are called and then you hope they work, right? I think the Browns are trying to find more things that give them answers post snap. Two things, right? So more answers post snap is in read a guy, react off of their movement, and take what they're not defending. If they're going to sit in the box and hang out and try to be a part of the run fit, then throw it outside, right? Or throw the slant behind them. If they're going to jump to the flat and jump into pass coverage, then just run up inside of them. What they're trying to do, and I think this has been pretty obvious watching a lot of their offense up close for years now, is the last 2-3 years, Kevin's tendencies started to really be something teams knew. And I thought defenses were on their toes about how to play them. I thought they were downhill, getting where they needed to go, and we're not fooled as often as we would hope. I think that's when you get those explosives, those 20-plus yard plays, is when you can have defenders truly questioning, is this run or is this pass? Because that's how you open up vertical shot throws. That's how you open up windows to throw, intermediate and catch after run type stuff. They're trying to do more of that in terms of the post snap manipulation, and that's either through RPOs like we're talking there, or choice routes, which give you hey, the safety has this leverage, then you change the route to this. It's built in hey, let's not put the entire burden of the offense on scheming something open, and say, hey, let's have some post-snap answers based on what the defense does. And what you're, again, kind of penning inside here is that we can keep defenders uncomfortable, because if you put defenders in situations they're uncomfortable, that's when you get more positive results. When defenses are confident, they know what you're doing for the most part, they know your tendencies, they know your concepts well, they look really fast. They play fast and they look fast and they swarm at you, and it's not fun. So I definitely think that's a humongous part of what they've done this offseason, is try to reshape their options at their disposal for when defenses think they're going to do one thing, that they have the ability to counter pivot and do something different that puts them in a bind again.
Are there concepts that you marry with the RPOs or play off of the RPOs to kind of keep the defense even further off balance?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some stuff where it can look like an RPO, but it's actually play action, and you're really trying to manipulate somebody into a space and then throw behind them, right? There's definitely some of that. If you have for example, that route we just saw, you could run a play action where you're kind of hey, this looks like an RPO. I look like but then you're kind of running an out and up, right? A double move. Or it looks like an RPO where we're selling. I'm looking at that guy. I'm eyes on him while I'm running the fake in the backfield. But then there's an over route that comes in right behind that linebacker jumping to the flat, right? You can double move off of those and be able to put in some very specific stuff that stretches defenses out, and kind of, like I said, it goes beyond that. So you can pair, if an RPO says, hey, we can have 3 options on any given play, right? I could throw this ball to the right side quick screen, I could throw to the speed out on my left, or I could give this football up inside for a counter concept run up front. Well, we can just make it look like that, but we can also know that we have this ability to manipulate this specific defender and then run a route that is an answer off of what we think he's going to do. So you can start to understand how the defense is coached to play it, right? And that's where somebody like Mike Vrabel is really good at identifying, hey, their rule in 3x1 or 2x2 is this. They're going to react this way to this look up front, right? The linebackers are taught to read the pulling guard. If he sees the pulling guard, he's going to be one step into run fit, then he's going to fly to the flat. Well, okay, let's just run a concept that looks like RPO off of that, where we send Tillman, instead of a speed out, let's put him on a 3-step fire slant where he's going to push back behind that window, right? There's just counters. It's chess game. So I definitely feel like there are ways in which teams start to understand those tendencies of things you're using. You can start to break those and be different and diverse. And again, I think the games you watch on Sunday across the entire NFL is which team has more answers for what the team's trying to take away. Think about it. All week, everyone's trying to take away. What What does this team do? What are they most comfortable doing, and how do we stop it? Because the way you beat teams in the NFL is make them uncomfortable. If the play caller's uncomfortable, you're going to beat them. The quarterback's uncomfortable, you're probably going to beat them. The defense is uncomfortable. They don't know what's coming. They have no idea. They don't feel comfortable about what they saw on film or what the game plan is for the week. Then you have a chance to hang some points on them. So it's a giant chess match, and whoever has the most answers and they've conceptually taught up their guys to run the varying different types of answers, then again, those are probably the teams that are winning more ball games than losing.
Jake Burns, as always, great stuff. Tell us where people can find you. Plenty of content like we just had here. Tell us about where you're doing things now.
Yeah, brownsfilmbreakdown.com. Very simple. We're there. We're doing film and articles, and it's less reactionary and more analysis. So it's not a place to come for breaking news. We're going to take that breaking news. We're going to put everything you need to know about why it happened and how it happened into place. And again, I think it's unique film content that you just don't really see anywhere else. And it's delivered to you in a daily form. And there's a great app that goes right to your phone that can make it very accessible too. So yeah, find everything we're doing over there. We're welcoming people into our orbit just about every day, and excited about that. And I think it's turning into a pretty good community for what I call the most passionate fan base in sports.
Jake Burns, as always, great stuff. Love the film breakdown. Make sure you check him out, brownsfilmbreakdown.com. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Jake Burns, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff. Again, brownsfilmbreakdown.com is the site. We're step aside, take a quick time out. Kenny Roda, straight ahead. We'll talk Browns, we'll talk Guardians. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE, and the Browns' 53-man roster set, the quarterback position, running back position, kind of working their way out. Let's welcome in Kenny Roda from the Kenny and JT Show, News Talk 1480 WHBC. Kenny, you look at this roster, and we've been covering this team for a while. When you look at it, what do you see?
Well, I want to use the words that Kevin Stefanski used yesterday, right? It's the first 53, not the final 53. So we expect a lot of movement. I would say 4, 5, maybe 6 player movement before September 8th against Dallas. So when I see it I was surprised by 2 running backs and only 2 tight ends on this team. That caught me a little bit by surprise. I was surprised that David Bell made the team. I don't think he's done anything in the time he's been drafted and played for Cleveland to be on this roster. And Devin Bush was a surprise to me at linebacker. I know that's not a position that they think very highly of, at least based on the talent on this roster outside of JOK. But that was a surprise to me that Devin Bush is on the current 53-man roster. So we'll see, like you said, some of these things are going to work themselves out, but I think they need to add another running back and another tight end.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if those are in the offing. My thought, because of being a vested veteran, might have been a handshake deal with Deontay Foreman, and he may very well pop back. Overall, though, we're talking about the last wide receiver and one of the last. I mean, this roster is probably as talented as any that I remember, and I go back to the mid-'80s covering them.
Here's what I will say. Since 1999, it probably is their most talented roster up and down the entire 53-man roster. When Siaki Ika, Dante Foreman, and Michael Woods II are the biggest names cut. That tells you that, you know what, you're pretty set. You know who your starters are. You know who most of the backups are. And then it's those final few spots that guys are jockeying for position to stay on the 53-man versus the practice squad. And that's the other thing. A lot of these guys that they get rid of probably won't get picked up. And the Browns are hoping that's the case, and they can put them on their practice squad. So, yeah, since 99, 1 through 50, well, let's go 1 through 48. I would say it probably is their most talented roster.
So Jack Conklin, back at practice for the first time in a while yesterday, talked about switching from right tackle to left tackle, that possibility if Jed Wills isn't able to go.
I'm ready to just be out in the field. So, whether it's left or right, I'm excited to. If left's the side I play at, then I'm excited for the opportunity. And I played at all college, so it isn't a foreign thing to me. So I'm just excited to get back out there, wherever it is. It's a challenge I've already done, because I played left all of college and then had to switch immediately to right, into the NFL. So it's really not a, it's a little weird, with the hips and moving, but otherwise, from a mental aspect, it's just flipping everything in your head to the opposite. So it's really not that big of a deal, and it's just doing it. Getting, if that's what they want, then just getting the reps and starting to feel good. I played 3 years of it in college, so it wasn't, it's a little odd, but it's not foreign. It's something that I did for a long time at a high level. So, if that's where they asked me to do it, I'm excited to do it.
Kenny, the other thing we found out, he tore his ACL, PCL, MCL, and meniscus. That qualifies as a pretty horrific knee injury. And the fact that he's back, he looks pretty lean and cut too.
Yeah, I'm not a big Jed Wills fan at all. I thought they swung and missed. They should have drafted Tristan Wirfs that year, and they took Jed Wills, who was a right tackle in college, blocking for Tua Tagovailoa right at Alabama, and they make him their left tackle. So don't get me started on that. But I'm okay with Conklin over there instead of Wills. Whoever is the healthiest is who I want there. And obviously, Conklin has had more success, most of it at right tackle. But if he's healthy, then put him at left tackle, DeJuan Jones at right tackle. You're set on the interior of that offensive line with Teller and Posick and Joel Bitonio. So, yeah, I'm okay with moving him over there if he's healthy.
All right, here's the question. How concerned are you with the offensive line? I know they didn't play but a handful of snaps in preseason. But, again, 3 of them, all your tackles, your top 3 tackles coming back from some sort of knee injury. Older guys at guard and offensive linemen just do not age gracefully.
The interior I'm not worried about. It's the bookends. It's right tackle, left tackle. DeJuan Jones, as I ripped on Andrew Berry for drafting Jed Wills, give him credit for finding DeJuan Jones later in the draft, not a first-round pick, and he filled in and did a nice job last year with the injuries before he got hurt. So DeJuan Jones at right tackle, inexperienced, only a year under his belt. So yes, that's going to be interesting to see how he steps in as the starter from week 1 and does there. And then even though he said he played it in college, right? He's got to just flip things around, in his mind from right tackle to left tackle. You're still wondering, okay, he says he's healthy and he's out there because, well, they've got nobody else maybe. How healthy is Jack Conklin? So having not played at all in the preseason scares me for him as well as it does for Deshaun Watson.
All right. 2 receivers that could be X factors for the Browns offense, this by Dogs by Nature. They go Cedric Tillman, 6'3", 215 pounds, gives the Browns something no other receiver can provide. Speed plus height. Big question is, can they count on him to develop and produce? And Jamari Thrash. In every training camp, there's one receiver that everyone sees as a missed prospect. Browns have uncovered. Usually the player's a journeyman or an undrafted rookie. This preseason, it was 5th-round pick Jamari Thrash, who was named the best rookie in training camp yesterday.
Right.
I like Thrash. I would caution preseason's a little bit different of those 2. Or are you going to go off the board with another receiver that you think ascends pretty high this year?
As exciting maybe as it is because of what Thrash did in the preseason, remember, DTR won the backup quarter job last year based on what he did in the preseason. How did that translate to the regular season? Well, they ended up using 5 different quarterbacks last year, right? So I wouldn't put Thrash in there. I think you're going to count on Cooper, Judy, and Moore as your 3 go-to guys, and then Tillman or Bell. And like I said, I'm surprised Bell is still there. Maybe they're scouring everybody else's waiver wire and seeing if there's another wide receiver that might be better than David Bell or Jamari Thrash. As I look down at this, what is that, 6 total receivers they have? So let's see if there's a move made there, because David Bell has been a major disappointment. And I know Andrew Berry is trying not to cut him because he drafted him. And it never looks good when you draft a guy in the 3rd round and you cut him. And here's the thing about Andrew Berry and wide receivers. He can't draft them, but he can trade for them. So let's see if maybe there's somebody they trade for or pick up, or these are the 6 they go with.
You know, I keep waiting for him to take they didn't have a 1st-round pick, so I can't say 1st round. Higher than a 3rd-round pick. By the time you get to the 3rd round, everybody in the 3rd round has traits that are good and deficiencies or holes in their game.
Right.
So if you would think they would try a 2nd-round pick, a higher pick on a wide receiver.
Yeah, it's baffling to me as well. Now, he's done well, like I said, Cooper in a trade with Dallas, and then with the Denver Broncos for Jerry Jeudy. So making up for his shortcomings in the draft, he's filled those holes, but you would hope, since he just signed a contract extension, right, that he would do a better job moving forward. And now that they'll have all their draft picks back because the Deshaun Watson trade is finally over as far as sending picks, to the Texans, maybe it's something they'll look at this coming season or this coming off season.
When you look at the roster, what do you see as a hole? Is there a hole or something that you think needs fortified?
I'm looking at them right now. Without Nick Chubb, I think there's a huge question mark at running back. Jerome Ford did a decent job, and he catches the ball well out of the backfield, okay? But I don't think opposing teams are looking at him and saying, all right, we got a game plan to stop Jerome Ford, right? So to me, running back, how well this offensive line gels, having not played together and moving some guys around. I think the defense has to do better on the road. We saw the numbers last year on the road, and I know Jim Schwartz downplayed that, in the offseason as they did a deep dive into the numbers and everything. But they've got to do a better job on the road, and they were horrible defensively in the red zone. Absolutely horrible. If not at the bottom, number 32, near the bottom 3 or 4 in red zone defense. So those 2 things have to get cleaned up if they're going to compete in this division with Cincinnati and Baltimore.
All right, this from Sports Illustrated. Before we go to break, every team's record, the predictions for 2024. They go the Bengals winning the division at 11-6, Steelers and Ravens tied for 2nd, 10-7, and they go Browns finishing 4th at 9-8. Did not get to see Deshaun Watson in the preseason. We're writing this at the moment when Cleveland's offensive line situation feels shaky. Watson was okay with really good offensive line play, the best offensive line coach in the NFL, and a great running game. If we get vintage bulletproof Watson, the offensive line situation matters. Anybody who tries to read anything into what happens in the preseason is asking for trouble. I can't argue with them saying that the Browns are going to be 9-8 if you want to defend that. I couldn't argue if you want to say they were going to be 11-6 or 12-5. I think that division is that close and that much of a – it's going to depend on – tell me which teams stay the healthiest, especially at the quarterback position.
That's the biggest thing, right? I think Cincinnati's the team to beat in the division. I think Pittsburgh will be in last place. Their quarterback situation is an absolute mess, and their offensive line is a bigger question mark than the Browns. So I think it's a 3-team race. Health is going to play a factor. Quarterback play is going to be the biggest factor, though. You're looking at Jackpot Joey, right? Lamar, 2-time MVP, and then which Deshaun Watson do you get? It's on Deshaun Watson. This team will go as far as he takes them. Michael Rega and I do a podcast, the R&R podcast. We taped one last night, and he and I both said, all right, around 10 wins if Watson plays all 17 games. And this is a make or break year for Deshaun Watson. So if he doesn't play all 17, hey, the speeches are great for Jameis Winston, but there's a reason he's a backup. Okay. So this comes down to Deshaun Watson. Can he deliver on the $230 million contract that the Browns paid him?
Kenny Roda and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break. Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons podcast. Does he think the Browns will go over or under their 8.5 projected win total? Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking with Kenny Roda from the Kenny and JT Show News-Talk 1480 WHBC. Bill Simmons on the Bill Simmons podcast. Is he going over or under 8.5 wins for the Browns this year?
They were 11-6 last year with Joe Burrow for a few of those wins. And then the playoffs started, and Houston absolutely beat the living shit out of them. They lost 45-14. Their defense was awesome at home and shaky on the road. And it feels like they're worse. Denzel Ward had another concussion.
Yeah.
Said 5. So you got that. Their offensive line is 100%, no question worse. And their left tackle might not be ready for the first week.
All right.
They tried to trade Amari Cooper. That floated out there. I never like when that happens. They were 6-2 in one-score games in 2023. Usually reverts a little. Here's the biggest thing for me is no first-round picks in 2022, 23, or 24.
Mm-hmm.
When you miss a 3-year cycle of just not adding anybody awesome, I think there's damage. And my take on this going under is this is the year the Deshaun trade officially morphs into shape as the worst NFL trade of all time.
Wow. Well, I
think he's unsalvageable.
This is the big test. But I will say this. Do you know what his record was last year? He did play a bunch of games.
Yeah.
It's 5-1 last year.
Kenny, obviously, Bill Simmons meant Joe Flacco, not Joe Burrow. Couple things that I would say. The one-score games, they played 5 different quarterbacks, 4 because we'll dismiss Jeff Driscoll. They were playing their 4th, sometimes 5th and 6th tackles. So there isn't going to be a whole lot of regression to the mean because the guys that were so beat up, you would think if there's a regression to the mean, they're going to be healthier. Relative to Deshaun Watson, everybody has their opinion. I think if he stays healthy, and that's a big if, and he wasn't an injury-prone guy, I'm not saying that. If he stays healthy, I think he's going to put up a lot of I think they're going to be really good if he stays healthy and plays 16 or 17 games. I'm a little higher on Jameis Winston than you are. I know he turns the ball over. He has some limitations. I think Kevin Stefanski's really good at working with limited quarterbacks. Look what he did with Baker Mayfield.
It's on Deshaun Watson. This is what it comes down to. He's got to throw for it. We were talking about it with Michael Regai last night. We said between 35 and 3,700 yards passing, right? Without a running game, they're going to throw the football, and that's what he was brought here to do. 30 touchdowns combined, passing and rushing from Deshaun Watson. Has he learned to slide or go out of bounds to avoid hits? I mean, when he got hurt last year, we thought it was an ankle injury, and it was the glenoid bone that none of us had ever heard of in his shoulder, and that's why he was done for the season, and that's why it's taken so long for him, to get back. So for me, the offensive line, yes, that does matter, and there are moving parts there. It's a fluid situation until everybody is healthy, so we'll see how that plays out. But this is the make or break year, in my opinion, for Deshaun Watson. This is a year where they've got to go at least a game further than last year, which means you win a first-round playoff game. You get to maybe the AFC Championship game. win a division, which hasn't happened since the late 1980s. So this to me is Deshaun Watson was given all that money, and they gave away all those draft picks because they thought he was their franchise quarterback. Well, it's time for him to finally step up. This I will agree with Bill Simmons. It's time for him to either say that this trade is going to work out and we're moving forward, or this was one of, if not the worst trades in NFL history.
All right, this one's from The Score. Cold hard truth about every AFC team. For the Browns, and they won't win the Super Bowl unless Deshaun Watson remembers how to play quarterback at a high level, and they feature a dynamic running game, compensating for the uncertainty about Nick Chubb's form in his eventual return from a knee injury. There'll be a dumpster fire if Watson, who's only thrown 14 touchdowns, 12 starts, is awful again. The run game ranked 26th in yards per attempt in 2023, so the Browns need the Watson we saw play for the Texans. Who they need to break out, Jerome Ford racked up 800 yards rushing last season, but it was very inefficient and had 39.7 percent success rate. Who's at risk of a full-blown decline? Jerry Jeudy is at a crossroads. Never touched 1,000 yards, averaged more than 65 per game, or averaged 5 receptions per game during his time with the Broncos. He fits in with Cleveland. It's a little confusing given Amari Cooper's status as wide receiver 1 and Watson's struggles. I disagree about Jeudy. I think Russell Wilson he wasn't good, and he was a marked improvement over what was throwing him the ball in Denver before that. Again, Watson's got to play better. But I think the one thing is, I think they were asking Watson to do things he wasn't great at doing. You put him in the shotgun, you try to find matchups, and you spread it out. That also leads to lighter boxes and a more efficient run game.
The Jeudy trade, I was surprised they made it, but not like disappointed that they made it, because they had to do something, right, at wide receiver. What blew me away was the belief in him with the contract they gave him, because I agree with what those numbers said. To me, he's not worthy of that contract. Let him play this year, prove to you that he deserves those numbers, and then pay him. Now, Andrew Barry's thinking, hey, we want to get ahead of this, and if he does have a huge year, it's going to cost us more. Well, they're rolling the dice on that. And the Amari Cooper thing was a bit of a distraction this offseason. He's your best wide receiver. So the two of them together, can they work off of each other and play with each other with a healthy Watson? Will their numbers increase? You would hope they would. You would hope that both of them close in on 1,000 yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns. But we just don't know. And the guy, we haven't even mentioned his name to this point, is David Njoku. They need the Chief to have a big season at tight end. And we'll see how Kevin Stefanski, they used to run a lot of 12 formations with 2 tights. Well, they only have 2 tight ends on the roster right now. So they're going to have to mix that up unless they add another tight end there and go back to those formations. But David Njoku, Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper are your top 3 receivers. And all 3 of them have to have big years. And the only way that happens, again, we go back to Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing is, tight end, when Watson was clicking in Houston, was a huge, huge weapon. So it fits into it. I think you'll see a lot less 12 personnel and a lot more 11 personnel, and some empty too. All right, let's turn our attention to the Guardians. Hadn't been good. Yeah. Hadn't been good. The lead is gone. It is a full-blown pennant race, and they're going to be fighting for a wild card, it looks like, as well. Tony Rizzo, Aaron Goldhammer, on what they've seen from the Guardians since the All-Star break, this ESPN Cleveland.
They're not hitting. They're not pitching. And I'm starting to wonder. I don't care what the PFI or what is it called?
That's the playoff, the playoff percentage.
The POF. I don't care what the POF says. Does that look like a playoff team to you right now?
Not really.
Hell no.
And to be honest, guys, they haven't been a playoff team since July 1st. And to be honest, going all the way back to the beginning of the season, I think we got a little duped when they got hot and played great for the first few months, which was super fun. and has given them the opportunity to make the playoffs here at the end of the year. But Riz, now it's almost like the majority of the season where they haven't been playing very well. And I got to tell you, I think the Royals, as I told you yesterday, are just the best team in the division. It is. Everybody's like, oh, if they'd have made a move at the trade deadline. Who's the guy that they could have gotten on this team to walk in the door at the trade deadline that would have materially changed?
Good point.
Everybody wants to blame Chris and Cherney and Dolan.
And Kenny, I don't often agree with Aaron Goldhammer, but I do in this instance. They got three guys that can hit, and when they don't hit, which they haven't been hitting, they struggle.
Right.
And they got one guy that they can give the ball to. And if you want to say Boyd now, okay, but Bybee is the only guy that's like, we got a chance.
Yeah, this team, I was waiting all season for it to drop off, right? Okay, it's going to happen eventually. It's going to happen eventually. Well, here we are heading into September, and as of the standings, as they wrap up their series with the Royals, they're going to be either tied with Kansas City or they're going to be a game behind Kansas City. Take that back. They'll either be, let's see, if they win the Thursday game or the Wednesday game on Thursday, then I'll get this right. Right now they're tied. So they could be a game back or a game up, right? So we'll make sure we get that clarified. So the last month of the season is going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. They have overachieved to this point. Will they continue to struggle hitting the baseball? Well, if Ramirez and Naylor and Kwan is the biggest reason I think they've dropped off offensively, okay? Kwan is batting under 200 since the All-Star break. Dave, he was hitting, and I marked it down here, 352 at the All-Star break. 198 in the month of August has dropped that batting average down to 299, right? So this is a three-team race still. Kansas City has the best pitching as far as the starters go. They've got three guys. They're going to have 100 RBIs. The Guardians have one. The Twins, I haven't been a believer in them all season. So it could be a two-man race between Kansas City and Cleveland, but don't count the Twins out because it's been that kind of a crazy year where look at the Astros. Everybody thought they were left for dead with their start, and now they're leading their division. So the Guardians are struggling, no question about it. And if Jose Ramirez doesn't have a huge September, they may drop out of that lead in the AL Central and hang on, hopefully, to be a wild card team.
Yeah, and relative to some of the guys that were traded. So let's take a look at this. These were guys that were the big pitching acquisitions at the trade deadline. Trevor Rogers was traded from the Marlins to the Orioles. He's 0-2, a 7.11 ERA. You see almost 2 walks and hits per innings pitched. He's currently in AAA. They sent him down to Norfolk. Eric Fedde hadn't been very good for the Cardinals. 5 starts, 1-3, 4.23 ERA. Kikuchi for the Astros has been really good. He's one of the reasons they've kind of ascended. 2-0 record, 2.89 ERA, and you see the whip. Kenny, if I bring it back to the Guardians, for the Guardians to challenge, get the lead in the Central, hang on, you need Bybee, you need Williams, and you probably need Cobb or Boyd to be able to pitch effectively. They got to get into the 6th inning. These guys aren't even getting into the 6th inning.
Yeah, let's throw Ben Lively in the mix too, right? Nobody realizes this. He has the most wins on the team amongst the starters with 11 and an earned run average under 4. But some of these guys are hitting marks in the season where the innings pitched for them may be a career high or something they've never done or haven't done in quite some time. And the bullpen has saved them. The MVP of this team has been the bullpen all year, right? Because of the injuries to Bieber and to Tristan McKenzie and Gavin Williams joining halfway through the season or whenever that was. So the bullpen has been the MVP. They're starting to leak a little bit as well as those innings are catching up with them. So, we've mentioned which 3 of those starting pitchers are going to step up down the stretch, right? And then hopefully into the playoffs and be there for you. You've got the fingernail issue with Alex Cobb. You've got, Boyd coming off the Tommy John. He's only made 3 starts, and he's looked good, but can he maintain? Or will that be a plus because their arms will be fresh and ready for the September pennant race and into the postseason. So it's right now, Kansas City looks like the best team in the division moving forward for the remainder of this season. But let's see if the streaky Guardians can get back on one of those hot streaks. And remember this, they do play 13 of their last 16 games at home, whereas the Royals will close the season out with 6 road games. And the Royals have to face, and I wrote this down in case we brought it up, they've got to face Houston, Minnesota, New York, and Atlanta yet to close out the season. And they've got some road games in there, 17 versus 12 home games to close the year. So I think this could come down to the final week. Let's hope the Guardians are still in.
Kenny Roda, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Kenny.
Always a pleasure, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Kenny Roda, make sure you check him out. Kenny and JT Show, News Talk 1480 WHBC. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We have no show tomorrow or Monday due to the Labor Day holiday. Enjoy the long holiday weekend. We'll see you Tuesday at 4 as the Browns get ready for the regular season opener. See you Tuesday at 4 on Sports for CLE.